Now I think I have the pleasure, yes, of introducing my colleagues. So Zsuzsa Pato has led the development of RAP's regulatory blueprint for the future of Europe's energy sector. It's a great resource, even if you're not in Europe, for what the energy transition needs to consider. She is also an expert on European market coupling and regional coordination and how those have evolved over time. Zsuzsa says that her superpower would be to make people believe that they are able to achieve more compared to what they think they can. And I really love this perspective. And I think Zsuzsa really sees possibilities where others may see constraints. And I think that's a perfect framing for what she's going to share with us today about what is possible with interregional planning and coordination. And my colleague Carl Linvill previously served as a public utilities commissioner here in the US for the state of Nevada. And he advises current energy regulators all over the western part of the United States as they collaborate on the issues that we're going to talk about today: regional coordination, transmission planning, and market design. And Carl has extensive experience bringing people together around shared goals, and he's going to share his insights on how to make that possible today. So that is who we have to share experience with us, and I'm not going to take any more of your time. I'm going to hand it over to Zsuzsa to start us off.
So, as Becky said, my name is Zsuzsa Pato, and I'm very happy that you are all here. I'm sitting in Europe, in Budapest, in my room in Hungary. I would like to talk about the European perspective, and Carl will talk a bit about the US, a specific region within the US. The main question, the fundamental question, is why to extend transmission networks? And I guess because you are all here in this meeting, probably you know, but maybe it's useful to recap. So it's very important to access renewable generation. Renewables here, but load is there. Sometimes that's a problem. Cost efficiency, to be able to dispatch the cheapest generation and to have a variety of load at the greater geographic span. And energy security, contingency at home. Sometimes it's a very, very forceful drive to extend the transmission network. But what do we mean by at home? At home usually means a legacy transmission network. And today's discussion is about how to go beyond whether it's a state or a group of states, to go beyond the legacy transmission network system. So in the US, you call it, I think, interregional planning, between regions. In Europe, we use the term cross-border. So I think it's useful to know the terminal differences. So what is the European story? The European story of interregional cross-border transmission planning comes together with the change of the market structure. So in Europe, decided to have a single market decades ago, and liberalizing its market. So these two things together brought together with the extension of the transmission network. And this is a very simple schematic of the history in Europe. So we had a success of energy packages, that's how we call it, and they built up what is the European single market today, power market, and the transmission network in terms of planning and operation. So at first, back in 1996, we decided to have some common rules for the internal market. We call it the internal or European or single market. And we separated between regulated segments, the networks, and competitive parts, generation and supply. In US, you call it restructuring. Here in Europe, we call it unbundling. And first, we started with management and accounting unbundling, so network were separated from the competitive segment. And then we went into legal unbundling and third-party access to network, which means everyone has the same access rights to the networks, which are national monopolies regulated by the regulators. And the customers has a freedom to choose among suppliers. So, various suppliers were competing for the consumers at the retail market. And then we had a third energy package, which really went for ownership unbundling. So network companies need to be ownership-wise unbundled from the competitive segment. and independent transmission system operator. We created some institutions, European institutions, which is very important from the governance perspective. ACER, which is the Cooperation of Energy Regulators. So it's not an association, but it has a legal mandate in European law. And ENTSO-E and ENTSO-G, who are the association of TSOs at electricity, ENTSO-E, and G is in gas. And I will talk a little bit about ENTSO-E later, because that's important. And we went to the fourth energy package, but the details are not important. What is important is that in 2008, Europe decided to have energy targets as Europe as a whole, not countries within Europe, to reduce emissions by 30%, to increase renewable by 30%, and use primary energy use by 20%. And it gave a big boost, a realization that we need to have a much more coordinated move towards a European transmission network. What is ENTSO-E? As I said, ENTSO-E is an association of TSOs, National Transmission System Operators in Europe. We have 36. Oops, we have. It's very important that this is not about the European Union. It's more than that. It's Europe. And they have 40 member TSOs. You can see in the map, there are 4 synchronous regions. One is really big, that's the core region. And the role of the ENTSO-E is to do the planning at that scale for the whole Europe. It's called 10 years network development plan, which spans over 10 years, and it's done every second year. Apart from that, the ENTSO-E provide adequacy outlook, seasonal and decade ahead, whether there is enough resources generation to meet the demand, and also network code, harmonizing the way markets are operated, how the cross-border capacities are allocated, how a generator can connect to the transmission network. So harmonizing across Europe. I would say that the market integration is basically done. And this map shows you in 2010 and 21 that the majority of the countries, the market is coupled. It means that we have a single merit order at Europe where generators bid into. So that's a big success story. This is the day-ahead market, but this is true also to the balancing market to some extent, and also the intraday market. But the thing is, there is still a grid congestion. So market coupling is basically done, but the transmission grid is not at the level as it should be. There's not an optimal congestion level, but much higher. What you can see on the map on the left or right is that these are the price zones or price islands in Europe. Because this is a single market, if there would be no congestion, we would have a single price in Europe. So this shows you that there is congestion. And on the other map, this shows, for example, what is the 2030 system needs identified by ENTSO-E that needs to be developed. So this is the kind of mapping or planning ENTSO-E is doing. So it has for 2030, 2040, and up till 2050. What is this 10-year network development plan and how is it developed? First of all, the ENTSO-E comes up with scenarios for possible futures, and then identifies the system needs, transmission system needs, and also storage needs to be able to reach the scenario that energy future it plans. And of course, the scenarios are based on the common European political targets. What is the target to reach with regards to decarbonization of the power system? And then this is a bottom-up process. So the way it is done is not that there is a single scenario and ENTSO-E defines all the needed infrastructure projects and somehow they get built. But usually the projects are promoted by member states and national TSOs. So it's a bunch of projects that is either arbitrary or not arbitrary, promoted by the member states. And this is one of the big debates today in Europe. The Commission launched its grid package, and one of the key issues here is to rethink this bottom-up process and make it a bit more a top-down planning. And the idea that the scenario will not be developed by the Association of TSOs, but somewhat more independent from TSOs, the European Commission, although this is a political entity, we have to admit, and based on open modeling. This is the proposal. So not a commercial, not a closed modeling, but an open modeling, more transparent. And ENTSO-E will only define the infrastructure need based on that modeling. Very, very, how to say, politically provoking idea is that TSOs, the national TSOs, some of the congestion rent they get at the cross-border have to be put in an EU fund. Of course, they don't like it. And the other very controversial point is the cost sharing. Cost sharing. Today, the cost sharing at the cross-border transmission element is between the two countries, and usually they agree somehow. But we have to be aware that the benefits, they go beyond those two countries in a mesh system. And now the proposal is that everyone who has a benefit has to share the cost, which means probably not two, but more, 4 or 5 countries have to agree. I'm not sure that it will make things quicker. So I think this is what I wanted to say about Europe, and happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Zsuzsa. We're going to turn the floor over to Carl for his presentation, and then we'll take questions from everyone for a few minutes after that.
Hi, again, I'm Carl Linvill. I've been with RAP since 2013. If you're, just come on, if you could please mute yourself. Thank you. I live in Davis, California, and I've been working on power system planning in the Western Interconnection from one seat or another since 1998. So an interesting intersection point on Zsuzsa's timeline. Her integration timeline started in 1996, which was about the same time that these conversations started in the United States, but it has developed very differently. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that, and talk to you mostly about the Western United States, where utilities joining together across state lines was a bit slower to come together than some other parts of the country. I'm going to explain why that is and what happened. So, here we go. So first of all, just a little bit about terminology. Of course, now for the US, we're talking about states rather than countries. We have a federal regulator, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, that's responsible for regulating interstate transmission and transmission in markets across state boundaries. And then we have lots of retail regulators that are mostly state regulators. We also have a lot of public power who are governed by a board that is not regulated by state regulators. So a little bit different language, but basically the same elements. So to give you the national perspective of what the US looks like, there are 3 interconnections in the United States. The Western interconnection here is in green. The Eastern interconnection is variously colored to the right. And you'll also notice that it does include some Canadian provinces in both the Western interconnection and the Eastern interconnection. And then down all by itself is ERCOT, which is largely the state of Texas. And state of Texas is its own interconnection. The North American Electric Reliability Council sets reliability standards that apply across these interconnections. But within the interconnections, there is a regional body that's responsible for ensuring that the NERC standards are implemented within that region. So for example, in the Western Interconnection in the green here, the Western Electric Coordinating Council is the one to whom that authority is delegated from NERC. Regional transmission organizations, as I said, develop differently across the country, and in some places have not developed at all. And as I said, these initial formation of these RTOs and ISOs, regional transmission organizations, and independent system operators, started around 1996. Some of them were built on top of previously existing power pools that connected states together with sharing energy resources. And some of them were new combinations of states and utilities that hadn't previously had a formal relationship with each other. So the, for example, PJMs and Mid-Continent ISO, they're both organizations that include real-time or balancing coordination, day-ahead coordination. They plan together as a unit, and they seek to build transmission to address needs within their boundaries. Others are more loosely or partially constituted. I'm going to now turn to talking about the West, which is unique. So in the West, we have the California ISO that was formed around that 1996 timeframe and became operational in 1998. The California ISO combined the balancing areas, or the utilities, or you shall call them in Europe the network operators, within the footprint that's in the yellow here. The California ISO combined them into a fully functional RTO with all of the capabilities, but it just coordinated those entities within the state. Some other states were headed towards restructuring at the same time. I was in the state of Nevada. It was headed towards restructuring. And when we had the whole market power problem in California, that's sometimes associated with Enron and some other market developers that engaged in some market manipulation that created a lot of price volatility. And that scared some other states off, like the state of Nevada, where I was from. In any event, the California ISO does offer all those services within its boundaries. But the interesting thing that I've observed in the West is how the Western states are coming together in the period since this initial attempt to create a regional market. So why should there be a West-wide market if we can manage it, or even a national market if we could manage it across all the boundaries? The three basic things are resource diversity, load diversity, and shared infrastructure cost. The resource diversity becomes even more important when you have decarbonization goals and you're trying to integrate variable renewable energy resources. So for example, in the Western United States, the wind resources are very strong in certain places. The solar resources are very strong, or much stronger in some places than others. There's a lot of diversity of load around the region. Some places peak more in the winter, some more in the summer, some at different times of year. So coming together to combine those resources provides benefits that can lower costs, increase reliability, and provide cleaner air. And the other reason, of course, is to share the infrastructure cost of making the integration of those resources work together. So instead of having all of those things together in the West, we have spent a very long time putting together this patchwork. You'll note, I just want to note for those of you who may be up to speed on the Western United States, this is a graphic from 2024. So it's changed a little bit in the last couple of years, but it's useful for conveying to you kind of the patchwork of how different utilities are working together. I'm not going to describe, these acronyms refer to balancing areas. For example, PacWest is PacifiCorp, Western Branch, PGE is Portland General Electric, and so forth. So we have many balancing areas in the Western Interconnection. There are 38 of them altogether. And where we've come to today is we have some markets developing, but they are not developed as a fully functional RTO. And so what I observed in the West during this period was that getting all of these different utilities from these different states to agree together to transfer control of their transmission assets into a single market operator became a very difficult negotiation and actually didn't move well. And so the innovation that happened in 2014 was the California ISO decided to start offering one service to multiple states to engage utilities from outside California to become part of an energy imbalance market. And now in the more recent times, we have the California ISO also offering a day-ahead market that utilities are now joining to. So there will be utilities that are in orange here, plus the ones in brown, PNM and so forth. Those will be in two markets. They'll be in or have two services delivered by the California ISO. Still, we do have regional planning in the Western United States, but it doesn't happen through an RTO. It happens in a less formal way. But it's not to be sneezed at, because the benefits that have been generated from, and this is just a breakdown of how much load is in each of the markets. The other thing I didn't mention is a second market platform emerged about 3 years ago to provide real-time and day-ahead market services to utilities in the West. That's called, what's referred to as the M Plus, or Southwest Power Pool Markets Plus platform. And that one is also moving forward. So this is, again, a snapshot from 2014 of how many folks are in each of those two platforms. So the thing that I just want to mention here quickly is, despite this happening in a piecemeal fashion, the benefits are very large. In this graphic, you can see each of the acronyms across the bottom is a different utility that's in the energy imbalance market, which is the one operated by the California ISO. And it depicts the amount of benefits that they've enjoyed by being in a common real-time market. The day-ahead market is going to be a much bigger deal, because real-time market is only 5% of exchanges. The day-ahead market is 40 to 50%. So the benefits are going to be far larger. Today, if you could please mute thank you. Today, the benefits enjoyed by the utilities joining together to be balanced by the California ISO is $8 billion. And the benefits that are going to be enjoyed from the regional collaboration through the day-ahead market is going to be much larger still. So, and then we have this parallel situation happening with Southwest Power Pool and Markets Plus, which is covering a different footprint in the West, and we expect them to experience benefits from cooperating as well. And furthermore, while these piecemeal steps may seem like, well, why can't we get all of the benefits? That the regional planning together is really important. But I think it's notable to say that these steps towards regionalization have already created closer alignment among states in characterizing resources, in planning, in working together towards building joint transmission projects. I will say everywhere in the United States, including places like PJM in the Eastern Interconnection, transmission planning in interregional transmission planning is very difficult and is not working as quickly as one would hope. So the formation of an RTO is not a magic bullet that solves the regional transmission planning problem. Regional transmission planning, as Julia showed in Europe too, is difficult, and for many of the same reasons. So with that, I think that's all I wanted to say for now. Thanks, and look forward to your conversation.
Thanks, Carl. We have a few questions in the chat, but feel free if you have other questions that have come up to share them through the chat. The first one is about interest in exploring a deeper coupling between the regulated and competitive layers of the electricity sector. This is an important issue that's being debated in India, and would like to hear your perspective on how such integration might evolve and what design principles could make the coexistence both efficient and stable.
I guess this is a question for me. Well, in Europe, we tried really hard to separate between the regulative and the competitive layers. So I wonder what you mean by exploring the deeper coupling of the two, because we were going on the other way. So the European model is that we have strict and ever stricter separation of networks which are regulated, and generation and retail, which is competitive. Even to the extent that, for example, grid companies, which are wire-only companies, are not allowed to own and operate storage, for example, linked to their network. It can only be done by a third-party actor through the third-party access, which is the same for everyone. So I don't really understand what you are trying to suggest with the coupling of the two.
I could quickly jump in on the entities that engage with one another in the Western United States include regulated utilities, independent power companies, and transmission companies, and also include large amounts of what are called public power, public utilities that are owned and governed either by a municipal government or by a cooperative structure. So there's quite a variety of structures that come together in a market, and this is, why it was difficult in the Western United States to come together. Was each of these entities, of course, have different economic interests. They're regulated somewhat differently, and many of them had not really worked together previously. So the first thing that happened to encourage the creation of markets and the collaboration was the federal government issued, and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission issued Order 888, which was an order that required the formation of regional transmission organizations, where members of those organizations would separate their operations into competitive operations and regulated operations. So, for example, utilities that joined an RTO had to divest themselves of their generation, had to hand over operation of their transmission systems to the RTO they joined. They could still own transmission, but the operation was handed over. So that was a first step towards, and the other interesting piece of that is that each utility was required to create an open access transmission tariff, which was intended to ensure that generation companies, customers, and utilities had a level playing field for buying and selling in the market. And so that's what started there. As you can tell from the constellation of outcomes in the United States, was that a success? I think it helped. It definitely got things moving, but it's not a magic bullet.
Thank you both. Carl, we've got another question for you about hydropower projects in the Pacific Northwest that are under long-term power purchase agreements. And does that long-term contractual commitment hinder the creation of a regional market?
Well, if you're from here, you know that that's a loaded question. There is, in the, and I'll make this very quick, so I don't want to, it could be a long explanation, but the bottom line is that the federal power system in the Northwest was built to encourage economic development, particularly of rural areas and growing areas in the Western United States. So when the hydropower system was created, certain entities were identified as preference customers, those who needed access to power. This is in like the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. The hydro system that was created has a legacy of rights and obligations of the operator of the power of the hydro systems. There are some operators, and then there's also the Bonneville Power Administration, which assists with ensuring delivery of power among those projects and among the preference customers who were given rights. So yes, the answer to your question is yes, there is a legacy of rights to hydropower, which complicate things. To be fair, there are also rights to other resources in the West that pre-existed the creation of markets, and those persisted through the creation of markets. So it's not just about the hydro system being an impediment. There, pre-existing contracts are a challenge in any case. Thanks for the question.
Thanks.
I have something. What I noticed about the US is that there are federal regulations and state regulations. In our region, we don't have that. What it is, the closest thing to our type of regulation is state regulation, which should be individual country regulations. And as a result, each country has their own regulatory laws that guide the regulatory organization. So this is it can be a little challenging because a lot of things that can be done in the US, we can't transfer the ideas or the technology or the approach to our jurisdiction because we are very nascent in our development. So I just would like to make that comment.
I think what I'd like to observe, something that I see in a little bit in the chat, in what Justin shared earlier and what Suni is sharing is the importance of building trust, especially where you don't have that federal system that's setting direction and saying, here's how it's going to work, that finding ways to build that trust across jurisdictions, across regulatory agencies is really critical. And it may not start with, let's do interregional planning or builds interconnectors across jurisdictions. It might be something smaller to start to build that coordination and cooperation.
Yeah, and maybe just to add to that, I think I wouldn't call Europe as a big success story, but we are further down the road for sure. But I think the reason, one of the reasons why is that so because Europe is a political project. So it's not only about energy, not even interregional transmission planning, So in Europe, we have common political goals with regards to energy policy. Majority of energy policy is regulated now at the European level. So this is in this whole context, how we try to move away from national governance and planning of transmission networks and operation, probably in the future, to a more regional or let alone European level planning, which we are having now. Thank you.
I'm from Thailand, and in Southeast Asia, we have the ASEAN Power Grid Initiative, like creating a market for 10 countries. And but currently, like the power markets are vertically integrated, so everything is run based on long-term power purchase agreements, including cross-border trading. So I feel like maybe we can learn something about how long-term power purchase agreements fragment regional grid integration efforts from other regions, and maybe I can like apply the knowledge to this case study in Southeast Asia.
That's helpful. I just say very quickly that there are opportunities for mutually beneficial trades that can make each side get more value out of these pre-existing long-term contracts and induce additional resources that serve multiple countries. So I think it's a great question. It is an issue that when you transition from bilateral contracts to a platform where you have freer trading, it's tricky, but it's worth it. And I guess one place to start is to look at resources that quantify the benefits of adding a market platform where previously you just have bilateral projects. So anyway, I'll think about that. And I think we're going to be providing you with some resources.
Thank you very much, Carl and Susanna and Becky, for joining us today for this session. And thank you very much for the participants for taking the time and to listen to us. We hope this was very insightful for you, and we will very soon come back with our next episode. So stay tuned and watch out. And thank you all.